Picture 2 days without food. You know where the herd moved. You tracked them yesterday, mapped the path in your mind, and today was the day you'd close the gap. Then the sky opens up. Not a passing shower, a relentless, wind-driven downpour that refuses to let up. It runs through the day, through the night, and into the next morning without pause. Hunting is finished. Tracks dissolve into mud. Bare feet on slick rock turn every step into a gamble. And out here, one twisted ankle is a death sentence. The river beside your camp climbs higher by the hour. And the fire, your only defense against cold and predators alike, is fighting to survive the wet air. This isn't boredom. This is a trap closing in. For nearly all of human history, rain wasn't a mild annoyance. It was a genuine emergency. And how our ancestors responded to that emergency may have shaped humanity more than anything they did under clear skies. Today, rain means closing a window, brewing coffee, wrapping up in a blanket, and pressing play on something to watch. It's ambient noise that lulls you to sleep before the episode ends. But that same sound, 50,000 years ago, carried 3 separate ways to kill you before it even stopped falling. First, cold. A soaked human body sheds heat up to 25 times faster than a dry one. Without clothing or waterproof cover, a prolonged storm in temperatures under 50 degrees could push a person into hypothermia within hours, and much of the ancient world, even parts of Africa at higher elevation, got that cold overnight. Second, flooding. Early humans favored caves and rock shelters near hillsides and rivers, which meant heavy rain often triggered flash floods. Archaeologists have uncovered flood-deposited sediment layers inside caves that were clearly occupied at the time, some so severe the sites were abandoned for good. Third, and perhaps worst, predators. Rain pushed animals toward shelter too, sometimes the very cave a family called home. In South Africa, researchers have found human remains alongside large cat remains in the same sediment layers, some skulls bearing puncture wounds that match a leopard's bite pattern exactly. Rain didn't just make life uncomfortable, it forced predator, prey, and human into the same cramped, dry space at once. And in that pressure cooker, one task outweighed everything else: keeping the fire burning. Here's why that mattered so much. Before roughly 40,000 years ago, it's unclear how consistently humans could actually create fire from nothing. Controlled use of existing fire dates back at least 400,000 years, with possible evidence stretching to 1,000,000 years at a South African site. But controlling a fire and starting one are entirely different skills, and for most of our history, most people likely couldn't do the second. If the flame died, relighting it wasn't guaranteed. Some groups carried embers instead, smoldering coals wrapped in green leaves or packed inside a fungus that could hold a spark for hours, essentially a biological lighter. This wasn't guesswork either. When the 5,000-year-old frozen body known as the Iceman was discovered in the Alps, he carried a complete fire-starting kit on his belt: Tinder Fungus, flint, iron pyrite, and backup plant material. Even millennia later, losing your fire was serious enough to justify dedicated equipment. So when the rain hit, fire came before shelter. Push it deeper into the cave, shield it with hides or brush. Feed it in careful amounts, never too much, never too little. Search out dead lower branches on conifers, still dry beneath the canopy. Split wet logs open to reach the dry core inside. Use birch bark for kindling, since a chemical in the bark lets it burn even when soaked. For hours, one person's entire job might have simply been tending that flame, because it wasn't just warmth. It was light, safety, cooked food, and the center of every conversation the group would have. With the fire holding and the group stuck inside, the next move was to build. The archaeological record backs this up clearly. Caves are loaded with signs of manufacturing: stone tools at every stage of completion, piles of flaking debris concentrated in the exact spots where firelight would have reached. At a South African cave site, researchers uncovered 100,000-year-old pigment workshop, complete with shell mixing bowls, ground ochre, and bone tools for application. This wasn't survival improvisation, it was a deliberate production process. Someone sat through a storm and manufactured color on purpose. Bone needles start showing up around 61,000 years ago, first in South Africa, later across Europe and Asia. Delicate tools with tiny drilled eyes that demand stillness and focus, not the kind of thing you make while fleeing danger. Then it gets stranger. At a Neanderthal site in France, archaeologists found a fragment of twisted plant fiber cord, the oldest confirmed string ever recovered. At another cave in Germany, they uncovered a 35,000-year-old ivory tool with 4 drilled holes and spiral grooves, built specifically to twist plant fiber into rope, essentially a handmade rope-making machine. Rope production is slow and repetitive, the ideal storm day task, and rope changed everything downstream of it. Better shelters, functional snares, tools lashed to handles. A staggering share of early human technology depends on string, and it was almost certainly born from someone waiting out the rain. Comfort mattered too. At a South African cave, researchers found genuine bedding dated to 77,000 years ago. Layered sedges, rushes, and grasses arranged as sleeping mats, topped with leaves from a plant known for repelling insects. This bedding was burned and replaced periodically to stay clean, meaning people were practicing pest control 77,000 years ago. That's no longer just survival. That's turning a shelter into a home. Then comes the part almost nobody expects: art. Cave paintings in southern France, roughly 36,000 years old, depict lions, horses, rhinos, and bears with an accuracy that still stuns researchers. Animals caught mid-stride, muscles tensed, heads turning. These came from people who had studied these creatures for thousands of hours and rendered them from memory, underground, by firelight. Similar sites exist elsewhere, including cave art in Indonesia, dated to at least 45,000 years ago, currently the oldest known figurative art on record. What's striking is where this art sits, not near the entrance where you'd naturally shelter, but deep inside, hundreds of meters through narrow, crawl-only passages. Someone carried an animal fat lamp into total darkness to paint there. Nobody does that in good weather with good hunting. You do it when the rain has lasted 2 days. Every tool is already sharpened, and there's nothing left but to go deeper and make something. It can't be proven that cave art began as a rainy day activity, but the pattern fits. The greatest bursts of creativity in prehistory line up with the places people were most likely stuck indoors for days at a time. That idea scales up. Rain may not have just produced art, it may have helped produce culture itself. Force 15 to 30 people into a tight space for days, and they talk, they listen, they trade information. A 2014 study by an anthropologist comparing daytime versus nighttime conversation among a Kalahari hunter-gatherer group found that daytime talk centered on practical matters, land, resources, disputes, while after dark, over 80% of conversation shifted to stories, songs, and ceremony. Firelight changed the subject. It softened the room and opened people up. The fire wasn't just heat, it was the original social network, and what got shared there was survival critical, where water lasts through dry season, which plants are safe, where the best tool-making stone lies, how to track a specific animal. Beyond the practical knowledge came myth, explanations for where rain comes from and why. Nearly every ancient culture has its own rain mythology, and whoever invented those stories almost certainly did so while living through the exact conditions the story explained. The power of this oral tradition is staggering. Some of the oldest verified oral histories on record are Aboriginal Australian accounts describing sea level changes from roughly 7,000 years ago, confirmed against real geological data. That kind of memory survives 7,000 years only if groups spend enormous stretches of time doing exactly this, sitting together and retelling the same stories again and again. Rainy days weren't wasted time. They were the mechanism by which knowledge passed from old to young, skills got demonstrated, and a group's shared memory was reinforced. Rain wasn't purely a threat either. Sometimes it was the best possible outcome. After rainfall, soft ground holds sharp, detailed tracks. Some of the clearest tracking conditions available come right after a storm passes. Rain also meant water, and early humans likely understood this well enough to store it. Natural rock basins that collect rainwater sit near nearly every known prehistoric campsite, and some show signs of being deliberately deepened to hold more. Food changed too, not disappeared. Mushrooms and certain plants surge after rain. Tubers pull easier from soft soil. Insects surface. In tropical Africa, termites swarm after rainstorms and deliver dense protein with zero tools required. Just pick them up. Chimpanzees still do this today, and early humans almost certainly did the same, likely on a far bigger scale. So what did ancient people actually do during an all-day storm? Everything that counted. They kept the fire from dying. They built the tools for the next hunt. They stitched the clothing that would carry them through winter. They twisted the rope holding their shelters together. They ground the pigment that would end up on a cave wall. They passed down the stories carrying survival knowledge to the next generation. And when the storm finally broke, they stepped outside onto soft ground covered in perfect tracks and got back to work. Rain didn't cost them time, it gave them time. Time behind every tool, every stitch of clothing, every story, every painting deep in the dark. Boredom, as you know it, didn't exist for them. When your survival depends on what your hands can build in the next few hours, you don't get bored, you get resourceful. And that instinct might be one of the biggest reasons we're still here.